What if I told you that After Effects was lying to you? So in the past year or so, a software called Davinci Resolve has been getting a lot of well-deserved attention in the editing sphere. But meanwhile, Fusion, the accompanying visual effects suite which comes built in with Resolve, seems to kinda get glossed over. But for a software that's arguably just as powerful as After Effects, that costs $0 to use 99% of its features, and doesn't even require you to leave your editing software to use it, it's hard to imagine why people aren't just ditching After Effects and flocking to Fusion, right? Okay, yeah, nodes can be a little intimidating, but trust me when I say that they aren't nearly as scary as they can sometimes look. In fact, 95% of compositing with nodes can pretty much boil down to three things: elements, effects, and masks. Elements produce the image, effects manipulate that image, and masks make cutouts of the image, or of the effect. So if we want to bring in a video, drag it in here, and we got our element connecting directly to our output. Now we could just start adding our effects, and whatever order they fall in our little train is the order that they take effect. So maybe we want to make it darker. Add a color correct node and make it darker. Want to make it blurry? Add a Gaussian blur node and make it blurry. Want to key out the green screen? Add a delta key node and key out that green screen. Want to apply a mask? We can grab, say, an ellipse node and connect it to whatever node we want to mask out. What the hell am I doing to this image? And all you really have here is a string of effects in order of operation that can be as short or as long as you want it to be. No different than having a list of effects on a layer in After Effects. And it really is this simple, right? Right? So 95% of what really makes node trees seem so complex can pretty much be explained with one word: merge nodes. The underscore makes it one word, by the way, so it counts. Now, merge nodes are the part that can feel especially weird to newcomers. But once you master what merge nodes are all about and what they allow you to do, these node graphs start to feel a lot less intimidating, I promise. Just humor me here. So the way After Effects is designed is meant to be a bit more intuitive to the way our human brains work. And admittedly, it kind of works. It's so much easier to think about it like scrapbooking, where you cut out a piece of this image and put it on top of this image. Layers. But the thing is, digital images don't actually work that way. In fact, digital images don't even exist at all. They're basically just a sequence of numbers sent to your monitor so that the little light bulbs know exactly how they should light up, and all of that creates the illusion of a cohesive image. So let's think about this for a second. How do you take a collection of numbers and then make a cutout of those numbers, and then take the cutout of the numbers and lay it on top of another collection of numbers? Well, your display can only understand one value per pixel per frame, so technically you can't? So the solution is to combine or merge the data from both images into one new collection of data. And we do that by using math equations. What math equations, your inquiring nerdy mind just has to know? Well, actually, that part's up to you. And if you've ever used any compositing software like After Effects or Photoshop, you've probably been making this decision all along and just didn't know it. So the equation we use is determined by something called the operator, otherwise known as the blending mode. So for example, if we're merging two images together and we set our operator to something like add, each pixel's value in one image is added to the corresponding pixel in the other image, resulting in a new set of values that is now our new output. And obviously the opposite of that would be subtract, which, as the name implies, subtracts the values from the foreground input from the values in the background input. Kinda cool. Addition and subtraction aren't that scary, right? We can also use multiply, which does exactly what it sounds like it would do. Instead of adding or subtracting the values from our images, it multiplies them. Ever wonder why multiply makes your image darker? Well, since our original values are being processed as something somewhere between 0 and 1, with 0 being black and 1 being white, the resulting values with a multiply operator will always be either equal to or less than the original values of either image. Because any value multiplied by 1 is itself, and any value multiplied by 0 is 0. And anything multiplied by a fraction of 1 is a fraction of itself, resulting in a darker value. Hence, multiply will generally result in a darker image. Another common one is screen, which gives us the exact opposite effect of multiply. So I'm sure you could probably guess what the equation is for screen, right? So let's say it together, okay? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Invert the two images, multiply them, and then invert the result back. Wait, what? Dividing the two values actually wouldn't give us the opposite effect of multiply. Though divide is an operator that exists, It just does something completely different and you'll probably rarely use it. So instead, what the screen operator does is it first inverts the images before any equation can take place. The two inverted images are then multiplied together, and the result of that is inverted back to normal. Speaking of normal, what about that scrapbook effect we were talking about? As some of you may have already guessed, this effect comes from an operator simply called normal, or over if you're in Nuke. And for this equation, we're gonna have to bring in the alpha channel. First, we take the background input and multiply it by the alpha channel of our foreground input, only we do it with an inverted version of the alpha channel. The result is then added to the pre-multiplied foreground image, resulting in the scrapbooky cutout laid on a background type of an effect. After Effects made it seem so simple, huh? By the way, as a quick side note, Fusion actually doesn't have the add operator for some reason. So what you can do instead is just leave it on normal, then bring our alpha gain all the way down. This effectively makes our entire foreground alpha pure black for our equation, so that when it gets inverted to be multiplied by the background input, it's just all ones, and it doesn't have any effect when multiplied, leaving us with an untouched background that is now being added to the pre-multiplied foreground image, effectively turning our normal operator into an add operator. Now, if you can't remember what all of these operators or blending modes actually do, that's totally fine. You don't actually have to, as long as you understand the effect that they have. But now that we got the basic gist of what merge nodes are for, let's take a look at this sample right here from a music video I did earlier this year. This shot includes a couple of plates as well as a bunch of fire elements. At some point in this composite, every single one of these elements has to get merged into the shot, resulting in this crazy looking spider web of branches going off in every direction to account for every element. But even this wild looking composite is just simply an element going through effects, being merged with another element, going through more effects, being merged with a couple other elements which were merged together, going through an effect with a mask applied, being merged with, whoa, what's all this? Oh, it's just a bunch of elements going through effects, then being merged together, and then going through some more effects. Okay, and then all this goes through some final effects, and we are done. Whoa, hold on. What about all this? And this craziness? This isn't just effects, that looks insane, right? So when we see a bunch of nodes kind of interconnecting like this, what you're seeing is one of the greatest benefits of using nodes in the first place. What's happening is we are reusing elements for different purposes, because we can send the output from any node in as many different directions at once as we wish. So say for example, we're using this smoke element, but we want to reuse this element across our scene. In After Effects, we would have to make a copy of our layer and make the desired tweaks to that copy. Any changes we want to make later on would then have to be replicated across our duplicates. But in Fusion, we can branch our output into a transform node, effectively making a copy, then merge the result back into our original. Now we can move our second smoke element wherever we want and even give it its own effects before or after the transform. And of course, we can do this several times and we start to get something that looks intimidating, but really isn't. This technique can also be used if, say, you want to use the alpha from one element as a mask for another element. In a bigger composite with a lot going on, that can sometimes mean connecting a node way over here to a node way over there. Certainly adding to the whole complicated look concept, but without actually being all that complicated at all. And there are actually methods to doing this without turning your comp into a total dumpster fire. But okay, look, I said it myself, After Effects is more intuitive and generally doesn't look as intimidating. So why would I advocate for nodes? Well, if you can believe it, there are actually some drawbacks to using layer-based systems, which require workarounds of a sort. Of course, I already talked about duplicating your elements, but what if we have a bunch of elements stacked on top of one another and we specifically want to add effects to the combined output of all of them? Well, we could use an adjustment layer, but what if there are other elements below those elements that we don't want to affect? Create a pre-comp, right? But with complex composites, a lot of times we end up with tons of pre-comps and even pre-comps within pre-comps, which is kind of a pain in the ass for our workflow. Alternatively, if we want to make a pre-comp in Fusion, we can just merge all of our foreground elements together before they get merged with the background, then apply our effects in this little gap here. And we still have ready access to all of our elements and effects right here. They didn't get zipped away into a pre-comp that we would then have to reopen in a new tab. But if you like the idea of pre-comps for organization reasons to make your comp look a little less intimidating, you can actually compile your nodes into a group, visually turning several nodes into one. And then you can always just double click on it to open it back up and make tweaks to all your effects from here. Either way, just don't forget to use these cool little underlays to organize your nodes and make things a bit easier to read. And how about a bonus for you? This is one of my favorite parts of Davinci Resolve in general. They're called power bins. So if we have a bunch of collected assets, we can store them in these bins, which will be available to use in any other project we want. And you can scroll through them right here from inside the software. No need to scrounge through our Explorer window. Now look, I'm not gonna lie to you, learning any new software has its learning curves, and Fusion is no exception. But if you can get past that initial curve, the benefits, in my opinion, are well worth it. It's free, it's built into Resolve alongside our editing and color grading and audio tools. No pre-comps are required. Troubleshooting is streamlined because all of your elements and effects and masks are just laid out in one graph in front of you. Reusing parts of your comp is cleaner and more flexible. Power bins, because power bins. Oh, and by the way, if I didn't mention, it's free. And I think a key thing to keep in mind here is that everything that looks intimidating in Nuke or Fusion is really just fulfilling a need for that particular shot. If all you need to do is key out your green screen and put your foreground on top of your background, it may not need to be all that complicated. Don't look at these intimidating composites online and think, oh, I need to be doing that. I clearly have so much to learn. Because at the end of the day, if you're getting the results that you need to be getting, chances are you're doing everything that you need to do. And if your scripts do need to be that complicated, trust me, you do not need to be thinking about that at all. You'll just be thinking about what you need to do and how you need to get there. Your node graph will make itself look plenty complicated without you trying, don't you worry. And you won't even realize it until you zoom out and realize the
abomination that you've released into the world.
Anyway, I hope that this was helpful, but let me know what you think. Have you already made the switch to Davinci Resolve and Fusion? Think you might give it a shot now? Let me know in the comments, and by the way, this is the first video I'm putting up on my channel, so if you want more like it, please like and subscribe. But for now, I bid you the happiest of filmmaking adventures, and I will see you next time.